How did you first hear about the this Eat Lancet madness, and what is this stuff all about?
I would say I first heard about it through a group of thought leaders in the low carb space. You know, people going, oh my gosh, this is coming, this is coming. And Nina Tykotz probably was one of the main people who was saying, this is about to be released. We need to really consider this. I think in my article, I've sort of summarized, I start with a little bit of a screenshot talking about Sandro Di Meo, who is the CEO of Eat Lancet. He's an Australian doctor. And his reference that I got from the internet was, beans over beef, which I introduce and say anyone who's been following me will know where the beans over beef message is coming from. That's from Loma Linda University. And I did a little quick intro into some of my research into Seventh-day Adventism. But the other screenshot that I put right next to it is from a dietitian who I highly admire in Australia. And she said, Sandra, you're not thinking about biodiversity. You're not thinking about sovereignty. You're not thinking about human health. Are you really considering these things? What are you doing? And I think that's a powerful statement from a dietitian standing up going, I don't think this makes sense. And so I try to capture a lot of different people's ideas, because as I say, I'm not a scientist. I was a nurse in my past life. I've been a photographer for 20 years, and I'm supporting Gary. So my research has been trying to understand the influences on our dietary guidelines. And Eat Lancet is one of the most powerful documents that's come out that could impact us hugely. Government policy, but as I say, medical education. They're trying to get it into schools. They're trying to get their Planetary Health diet as accepted as an agenda and something that has to happen.
Yeah,
The
mandated.
fear and
It's not just like, hey, let's tell everybody that they maybe should eat some plants. This is more like we're going to work directly. We're going to interface with governments, local, national, and we're going to bring
how do
upon
we
about these
tax? How do we
guidelines.
ban? How do we regulate? How do we make this law? I mean,
Yes, and you mentioned
right
ban
in the
and
document.
regulate. It's not just let's suggest. They're going full on abolitionist style, and
Yeah.
some of these people really believe that their movement is fighting an animal holocaust. Um,
And Carney Sostenabili, sorry if I haven't pronounced your name correctly, um, mentions that 37 scientists might be authoritative, but they are not consensus. And this Eat Lancet report hasn't gone worldwide. It hasn't gone to scientists from a whole range of things that are independent. Nina Tykotz worked out 31 of the 37 actually are vegan or work for companies that support vegan messaging.
yeah,
And the panel actually said, except for Walter Willett, none of them are eating this so-called Planetary Health diet themselves. So why not? Why are they putting it on the masses and the elite aren't having it?
yeah.
Gunhild Stordalen, who was the instigator of the EAT, she was given the EAT Foundation as a gift from her billionaire husband, Peter Stordalen, who
Happy
owns
birthday.
a hotel chain, massive hotel chain in Norway. And she has this belief that being vegan and a vegan diet will help save the world. She has been on this agenda and collecting people. And I think once you have an opportunity to start talking on these massive platforms and people start listening and everything else, it must make you feel even more powerful and want to take it further. The connections that she's been able to develop, you just say the World Business Sustainable Development Council,
Yep.
Council of Sustainable Development, she's got food industry, she's got philanthropic groups all giving so much money to this EAT Foundation to promote this.
Yeah.
But there's a screen grab that someone shared from her Instagram account saying she'd done a handshake with Alessandro Di Meo. There's a doctor from Australia who's the CEO of EAT. Did a handshake to try plant-based vegan diet for a month. You go, you're putting this on the world and you haven't even tried it yourself for a month. Admittedly, she's a flexitarian and I don't think she eats red meat.
Yeah.
But this is beside the point. Here they are doing an N equals 2 experiment for 1 month to go, yeah, everyone has to do this.
Yeah.
And I think this is really challenging. Marty Kendall, who's an engineer in Australia, his wife has type 1 diabetes, and they were living by the dietary guidelines for diabetes and for normal living, and were getting sicker and sicker.
Yeah.
So as an engineer, he's developed this amazing app and data system where he plots food and really works out the nutrient content of every single food.
Marty Kendall's nutrient optimizer. Yeah.
Optimizer, amazing man. He put the Eat Lancet dietary guideline into his optimizing nutrition app and came up and found that it was only gave us 26% of the nutrients we require in a day. Not only
that's
that,
just on paper, right? I mean, that's not even factoring in bioavailability of these nutrients that may be locked up in fiber or other, right? Calcium being blocked by oxalate, and you could have a lot of.
It's a scary document, and he's really pointed out that their marketing might look vegetarian or vegetable centric because their plate looks like it's half covered in vegetables. Yeah. But when you actually plot it into this data and this pie chart that he's created, it's actually only 3.1% of the pie chart is vegetables, despite the fact that the plate looks like it's half filled. And 3.1% is a reduction in the current recommendations we have in our dietary guidelines. Yeah. They advocate 0 to 14 grams of meat. And I don't know if you've worked it out, but the recommended is 7 grams, but they'd really prefer you to have none. Yeah. This is a piece of minced meat. It's a ball about that size per day for the masses while they can eat meat, apparently. But that's miniature, and yet you're allowed to have 31 grams of added sugar because Pepsi, of course, is part of the EAT Foundation.
And grains are the main portion of the plate, too.
Yeah, and you can have more added sugar than you can have meat. I mean, this isn't the sugar that's in fruits and the glucose sugar that's in the 232 grams of wholemeal grains that they recommend we have. 232 grams of wholemeal grains is equal to 58 teaspoons of glucose sugar. And that will perpetuate the type 2 diabetes mantra that it's a chronic progressive disease. They'll have it for life and they'll end up on more and more and more medication. Another partner of the EAT Foundation through this, the actual partner of EAT Foundation is Novo Nordisk, and 85% of their income is from insulin supply.
Wow. Well, I mean, of course, you've also got Bayer. You've also got DuPont. You've got all these.
They're part of the World Business Sustainable Council of Sustainable Development, but Novo Nordisk is actually a partner of EAT Foundation.
Well, didn't EAT Fresh? All right, so it says here, Fresh was jointly launched in January 2017 by the EAT Foundation and the World Council for Sustainable Development.
And it uses the Wellcome Trust as a major funder. Wellcome Trust is I would think, the biggest philanthropic trust in the world. Mm-hmm. It was started by a guy called Henry Wellcome, who made his fortune in pharmaceutical industry.
Yep.
And currently they have $29 billion invested in this trust.
Yeah.
Of which they give $1.2 billion as a philanthropic gift to organizations they would like to support.
And it's the second biggest foundation behind the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Second biggest. Okay, there you go.
And it was started by, guess who? I'll let you tell the story because this is fascinating.
Henry Wellcome, as I say, he grew up in an Adventist household. His father was an elder of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so he believed in this health reform vision, and apparently he took the Garden of Eden diet belief through his life. And I would say a lot of the philanthropic use of the money would go to supporting things that also supported that health reform vision. But
so his company that he owned eventually became GlaxoSmithKline, for those who...
Yeah.
How insane is
$29 billion worth of pharmaceutical industry profit is the Wellcome Trust. And I read a great article that stated that a lot of the $1.2 billion that they give out annually actually goes to support activities that will counteract the companies that they're actually invested in to make this money that are creating harm. And I give a great example in the blog post that I wrote about emissions. But this is the whole point. The philanthropic arms of some of these foundations are simply band-aiding what they're investing their money in and creating the harm in the first place.
Right.
We think, oh, this is great, they're doing this, but you go, but how have you created that? So it's
Yeah, so I mean, the same foundations that started the Green Revolution to feed the planet and save the world, they also had a really deep and invested interest in eugenics, including the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Germany. So the Rockefeller Foundation helped to start the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, which was the German eugenics program, and they helped to start Cold Springs Harbor in the United States, which was where the eugenics office, I forget what it was called, the U.S. Eugenics Office or something like that was. This same organization, the Rockefeller Foundation, which is the Standard Oil Trust money from John D. Rockefeller, went into creating the Green Revolution and erecting grains as the main source of nutrition in the Western world too. So the philanthropic angle is super important that people understand. I think this might be one of the most important aspects of, the history and geopolitics that gets very, very overlooked, especially with nutrition policy, wars, all these little insignificant things like that.
And I think this is the point. The food industry started nutrition science as an actual entity because they funded this nutrition foundation at Harvard University, and it's just grown and grown. They funded the money for nutrition reviews, which Fred Stair edited, then Mark Hegstead edited, and then the International Life Sciences Institute, which Alex Malaspina, as vice president of Coca-Cola, founded in 1978. This is, again, the same food, pharmaceutical, all those groups, like it's massive. The International Life Sciences, ILSI, they now run nutrition reviews, and it's still one of the most widely used documents, journals for health professionals. And it's dictated by the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, don't people get it? Don't they look to see where this information is coming from? I found doctors don't. A lot of doctors don't have the time. They're given information and they trust it. If it comes through the British Medical Journal, if it comes through the Medical Journal of Australia, they trust this information has been vetted, and it's really important because they don't have the time to look back. It's fascinating how healthcare has become band-aiding sick care. And it's a scary place.
Yeah, it's basically disease management, right? I mean, it's
disease management.
Lots of
if your blood pressure is this, you prescribe that. If this is this, you operate. Where do we come back? And I think doctors specifically aren't taught nutrition. And bless you.
Sneeze attack over here. Yeah, we're getting some windy, dry weather, and my nose is not feeling it. It's because I'm not vegan, though, right? I mean, if I would just go on a plant-based diet, all these sniffles would disappear, and the cows would rejoice because we would stop abusing them.
I think Gary's had an interesting lot of research that he's done into this whole cows cause methane. Why are we picking on cows? Sheep actually perform that. Sheep give off more methane than a cow, and scarab. That's okay. Scarab beetles, termites, millipedes, and centipedes produce more methane than any ruminant on this earth.
That's a great point. I think I saw his tweet, and there's so many examples of just how incoherent the arguments that get brought forth are, but it's still he's being pushed through repetition, right? I mean, it seems like if we hear something enough, we'll believe it's true, and the university system
health washing.
Health. I like your term, health washing. So we've been health washed into dis-ease. I mean, what is the result of all this grain, all the sugar, and all of this? Not only is it destroying our health, but we've got a food system that we're disconnected from, right? There's no longer family farmers. People aren't looking at having cows and goats on their land. They're looking at, well, maybe I can make it big and be a tech billionaire or something like that. I mean, people aren't aspiring to even be connected to their food anymore. So I think this whole global agribusiness that's destroyed local agriculture is so embodied right here in this Eat Lancet message. It's like a great kind of holographic diagram of exactly what's going on here, because you've got DuPont, Bayer, GlaxoSmithKline, Seventh-day Adventism. You have all these different interests coinciding with this report that is that's pushing an industry mandated global policy that people want to implement with force, right? Where they're talking about abolition of these foods.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And you think this is a very interesting concept because I don't think it's come out so blatantly before. And that's had a lot of the low carbing people really up in arms and saying, where's the scientific consensus on all of this? It's being mandated. Yeah. It's a real concern, whereas before there's much more of a soft push. But this document is very frightening.
Yeah, and it's out there in the open for us all to see. So I'm looking at the picture of the Planetary Health plate right now, right? It's kind of over the top. It's
really, so friendly.
yeah, and it's so elementary school, right? You know, they got the bright colors and it's a little pie chart. Yeah. It's very geared towards an uneducated audience, right? And what's crazy is when you look at some of these recommendations, like the Canadian Health, with the Canada Food Guide, even the stuff that's made for physicians is so dumbed down. It's very base. Have you checked out the Canada Food Guide yet?
The Canada Food Guide is very concerning. Australian dietitians, Canadian dietitians, and South African dietitians are part of a group called the PEN group, and they work together. It's quite interesting. The dietitian who was involved in Gary's, Claire Hewitt, who was the CEO of the Dietitians Association of Australia, and involved in Gary's silencing. There's a picture that who popped up recently. Oh, Marianne DeMasi put up a picture of Claire Hewitt with Claire Jules String. Sorry, name's gone out of my head. The dietitian who reported Tim Noakes in South Africa.
Oh wow!
So these groups, are really connected.
Yeah.
And Mark Walquist, who is Gary's expert witness, he's closely tied to Esther Walster, who was the expert witness in Tim Noakes' case.
Yeah.
They've been part of this GISM declaration, which is Planetary Health diet, I believe.
Yeah.
A diet for planet and people, and also with Stefan Rosner, who was involved in Annika Dahlqvist's silencing about low carbohydrate, healthy fat up in Sweden. So we've got really key people that you start to map out, and you can see how they're working on this same thing, this vegan push. I would be fascinated to know how involved they are in patents. I've found some connections to patents to legumes and to the fake meats and to all these other things. Right. Again, this is a potential conflict of interest in this desire. The profitability of the fake meat, the alternate meat industry, is beyond anything you could imagine.
Oh, and it's a total monopoly too. It's an absolute monopoly on all resources.
And I think we're walking into it thinking it would be lab meats and all these things. But did I read that the latest hamburger that was made was $37,000?
Yeah, but no, it's going to be sustainable though, Belinda. There's $37,000 for one burger, but in the future, we'll make them so cheap.